Let's say you're after a posh family saloon. Should you go for an Audi A4 or maybe a Mercedes C-Class? Or how about the recently revised BMW 3 Series? Or should you forget the Germans and go for something a little bit more left field, like a Genesis G70 or even a DS9? Well, in this video, we're going to find out which of these 5 cars is best. Buy, sell,
Car wow.
Let's start off this video by talking about the price. So these cars start at this much each. Now you might be thinking, wait a minute, why is that DS9 here? It's way more expensive. You're right, it's from the category above. So normally you compare that to a Mercedes E-Class and a BMW 5 Series, but it is less expensive than those cars. And when you actually see how much each of these cars prices as tested here, they get close. So I've put the DS9 in as a wild card to see if it's worth spending the extra on to move up a class. After all, it is fully loaded with kit. Now, what really matters anyway is the price you pay for a car at a dealer. And if you want to see what offers are available on these cars, you need to head over to CarWow. To do that, you just click on the pop-out banner up there. I'll find the link in the description below. It's dead easy. If you want to do it at a later date, just simply Google "Help Me CarWow" and we'll help you choose the right car for you and get it for a fair price from one of our trusted dealers. The Audi A4 is a neat and tidy looking car. Obviously this is the S4, so it has some upgrades such as more aggressive front bumpers and rear bumper. It's got some side skirts, bigger wheels, but it does have the worst fake tailpipes I've ever seen. The one side are real, then the other side are completely fake, just stuck on. They're an embarrassment to the automotive industry. Now if you want to see what the normal Audi A4 looks like, here's a clip of one. I'd say it was inoffensive but a little uninteresting. As part of a midlife facelift, BMW has made some tweaks to the face and the rear end of the 3 Series, and I think the changes are welcome. It's a sharp looking car, very neat, tidy, sporty edge to it, looks good on the road. The Mercedes C-Class is a Class E looking car. You know, it lives up to its name really. That's all I've got to say on the matter. There's not anything that really stands out, makes you go, wow, look at that, and there's nothing that makes you go, oh, I don't like that really. It's a good all-rounder. You'd be proud to have that on your drive. Gotta say, I love the look of this G70. Real smart looking car. Like the light design at the front and at the back, and it really works in this red paint. Very smart, very sporty. The DS9 is quite a smart looking car, though it's not that distinctive, is it? Apart from one thing, that strip on the bonnet. Do you know what other cars have strips on the bonnet? A Mercedes Maybach and a Rolls-Royce Phantom. The interior of the DS9 is rather unusual. I mean, look at this. When you turn it on, start button all the way up there, by the way. What's that all about? This clock rises up, which is kind of cool, but you think, is that really necessary? And it's all a bit overdone. It's like they just went crazy designing it and like loads of different features, and it feels, in some ways, a little bit childish, or maybe even like a concept car that no one would ever put into production in reality, but they just went and did it anyway. Then there's the infotainment system. Yes, you've got this big screen, but it's all just a bit awkward and confusing to use. And if you want to control the climate, then you have to do pretty much most of it through here. And then the digital driver's display, it does provide all the information you really need. It's just that it tries to design it again into some kind of fancy fashion display, which is unnecessary. That's the problem with this car. I think it's just more style over substance. I think out of all the cars here, the BMW has the most expensive feeling materials overall. Also, they've updated it with this new curved screen like you get in their i4 and the iX, and it looks good, it really does. There is an issue with it though. They've moved the controls for the climate into the screen, so you now have to operate it all through here, which is a bit of a faff. I mean, look at that menu. It's a bit of a shame really. What's not a shame is that they got rid of the gear selector, which was like a kind of big thumb that stuck up out of the center console. Instead you have this little toggle switch, which just seems more sensible. I do like this interior overall though, it's very nice. Good place to spend some time. The interior of the C-Class is actually a contrast to the exterior because it's a lot more sporty rather than just being elegant and classy. The way the dash just goes into this center console here, so you feel cocooned as the driver. And then there's this big screen here, portrait style, which is actually quite easy to operate when you're driving. The only problem is that you do have to look down off the road following the sat-nav on there. You can follow the sat-nav on here if you want to. The climate controls are integrated into the screen, but the way they've done it means they're not that hard to actually operate. There is a few problems with it though. And that's it. Some bits of trim feel cheaper than you like, including the gear selector, which is a shame because I actually love the location of it. I don't know why you have like these buttons and levers here when on the steering column it's just much easier to select drive or reverse. I do like the interior design of this Genesis. It's quite cool, quite quirky. I like the fact that you have physical climate control buttons and shortcut buttons here. The infotainment system feels a little bit too far away to touch sometimes. And while you do have a big digital driver's display, the graphics are a little bit low def. Quality though, it's up there with the Germans easily. The inside of the Audi is a really nice, simple, neat and tidy design. Build quality is extremely good. I like the sporty steering wheel you get on this S version. The infotainment system is in your eye line, which is good, and it's quite big and it's easy to use. And I like the fact that the climate controls have their own dedicated buttons and the way you have the actual temperature in the dial itself. Digital driver's display is clear and easy to read. They haven't changed it much over the years, but it's absolutely fine. This is a very nice interior. There's a good amount of space here in the back of the A4. Knee room's good, headroom's good, people over 6 foot will be fine. The only problem is the big hump in the floor there, so if you're carrying 3 people in the back at once, obviously the middle person has to straddle that, and this central seat is a little bit on the firm side. Here in the back of the BMW, knee room's really good, headroom's really good, adult's fine back here. And this centre seat is quite squidgy, though you do still have a problem with a big hump in the floor, so the person in the middle has to kind of straddle it. One thing that's good about BMWs, all their cars actually, is that the seats always have very deep bases, so you get lots of under-thigh support. I'll stop rubbing my thighs now. The back seats of the C-Class are absolutely fine, so knee room's good, headroom's all right. My issue is the footwell does feel a little bit on the cramped side, and so you can't really get quite as comfy as you might think you should be able to. If you get the central seat, it's a little bit raised up and firmer than the 2 outer seats, and of course you've got this big hump in the floor as well, like many of its competitors. It's just the way it is in these kind of cars. Here in the back of the Genesis, look, if I sit back and upright, my head is pretty much touching the roof because of how much it slopes. Then there's a knee room, which is also quite tight for this size of car. Worst thing is though, is that this seat base really does extend quite far, which would normally be a good thing if only you could actually stretch your feet out, but the footwell's really, really tight. And so this part here is jabbing into the back of my calves. I wouldn't want to carry 3 people in the back either, because this is raised up, so whoever's in the middle seat better be short because of that sloping roof line. And the nature of these footwells means I don't think there's enough room for everyone's feet. The back seats of this car are a little bit of a fail. Here in the back, the DS9. You can tell it's from the class above because there's just way more room. So if you are carrying people in the back regularly and they're largish adults, it's definitely worth considering. And it's the only one that I'd be happy to travel any distance in the middle seat, because while there is a bit of a bump in the floor, it's not much, and you can even put your feet on it. I mean, that's why I've included this car in this test, because it might be worth spending the extra if you really do need the extra practicality. How do these cars compare though when it comes to carrying luggage? Well, the Audi has a very practical boot with a capacity of 460 litres, and look, nice big opening and a square shape. That is good. Though I have to close it by hand. I feel like a peasant. With the Mercedes, the boot capacity is 455 litres, so pretty much the same really. The shape is not quite so useful because of the curvature of it, and on this particular car, being the plug-in hybrid, because you've got a load of batteries underneath the boot floor, the capacity drops to 315 litres, which is just like a hatchback. Not ideal. Once again, I've got dirty hands. Should have specced the automatic tailgate. BMW, oh yeah, here we go. 480 litres of space, and once again, like the Audi, a nice square shape, though the opening isn't quite so large. That's impressive though. Happy with that. I don't know why I'm doing that, because I can press the button. Then we come to the Genesis. Its boot capacity is 330 litres. The opening, also like the Mercedes, it's a bit curved, which isn't ideal, and it's actually not that large, is it? At least we've got that tailgate though. The DS9 has the largest boot capacity though. It is 510 litres, but then it is a larger car. However, this one's capacity is reduced somewhat because it's got the upgraded sound system, and then you have 470 litres. Oh dear, so it's actually smaller than the BMWs. The opening, it is quite large for a saloon car, and look, because it's a plug-in hybrid, there's a space for your storage of the cables and all that kind of nonsense. And because the DS9 is so well equipped as standard, you get the electric tailgate. There are 2 versions of the DS9. They are both 1.6 litre turbocharged petrol plug-in hybrids. There's this one which has a single electric motor with this much horsepower and it's front wheel drive. Then there's another version with an extra motor on the rear axle with this much horsepower and obviously 4-wheel drive. Both cars have 8-speed automatic gearboxes. Engine choices on the A4 include two 2-litre petrols with this much horsepower and this much horsepower, and two 2-litre diesels with this much horsepower and this much horsepower. The higher powered diesel comes with all-wheel drive, whereas the others that I've mentioned come as front-wheel drive, though they all get 7-speed dual-clutch automatic gearboxes. Then there's this version. It's a 3-litre V6 diesel with this much horsepower and of course all-wheel drive. The BMW 3 Series is available with a 2-litre turbocharged petrol engine with this much horsepower or this much horsepower, but you can also get that engine mated to an electric motor as a plug-in hybrid, and that has this much horsepower. Then there's the 3-litre straight-six turbo petrol in the M340i, which has this much horsepower. Diesels, there's a 2-litre turbocharged diesel with that much horsepower, or a 3-litre straight-six turbocharged diesel with this much horsepower. All 3 Series are automatic, and you can get certain versions with all-wheel drive. The Mercedes C-Class is available with a 1.5-litre turbocharged petrol engine with this much horsepower, or there's a 2-litre turbocharged petrol engine with this much horsepower, or you can have that engine with a plug-in hybrid, so it's boosted by an electric motor which has this much horsepower, and that's what this car is. Then there's 2 diesels, both 2-litre turbocharged diesels, one with this much horsepower and another with that much horsepower. All C-Classes are rear-wheel drive and they have 9-speed automatic gearboxes. The Genesis G70 is available with 2 2-litre turbocharged petrol engines, one with this much horsepower or one with this much horsepower, which is what this car is. Then there's a 2.2-litre turbocharged diesel engine with this much horsepower. All G70s come with 8-speed automatic gearboxes as standard, and they're rear-wheel drive. Now we've done the engines, let's see how quick these cars are from 0 to 60 miles an hour. It's time to launch them. This Genesis is supposed to do 0 to 60 in 6.1 seconds, but let's see what we can do. We've got specialist timing gear up here. Launch time. Wish it was lunchtime, but anyway, launch time. Put a wheel spin there. That will have affected time, 7.4. Let's whip it out of Sport Plus and just go into normal sport. I'm going to give it one more shot because that was just... Come on. 7.13 seconds slower than I was expecting. It is greasy. This DS9 is supposed to do 0 to 60 in 8.1 seconds. There we go. It's reality. It's doing all right. The reality is almost 8.3. It actually felt a bit quicker than that. I don't know if it's the noise from the engine or the fact that the gear changes in sport mode are quite pronounced. This plug-in hybrid Mercedes C-Class is supposed to do 0 to 60 in 6.1 seconds, so the same time as Genesis claimed. Will this Mercedes fare better? Come on, let's do it. Ooh, sounds like fake noise being played through the speakers to make it feel sporty, but the result is clear to see. 0 to 60, 6.3 seconds. Not quite 6.1, but considering the conditions, much better job than the Genesis. This 320i is supposed to do 0 to 60 in 7.4 seconds. Let's do it. Bit of wheel spin away from the line. Engine shrieking. We have a time. Now that wheel spin affected things. 7.7 seconds. So the S4 is supposed to do 0 to 60 in 4.6 seconds. See what it'll do. Oh yeah, quattro traction away from the line. It's the only car that beat the claimed 0 to 60 time, and that is the benefits of 4-wheel drive. Even when the surface isn't ideal, it can put its power down. But the reality is, for most people who are buying these cars, you don't really need it because you don't drive like that. You don't launch a car, do you? Unless you're a motoring journalist or a hooligan. Right, let's see what these cars are like to drive, and I'm starting with the Genesis. Never driven this car before, so I'm quite excited by it. So I'm going to start off sensibly by driving it in town, and here it's reasonably nice enough. So the steering's light, visibility is actually pretty good, so dash is quite low, so you get a good view forward. Decent sized back window as well, I'm happy with that. The suspension, when you've got it in comfort mode like I have, it's okay over bumps. You do feel them a little bit. It's not quite the smoothest, softest car in this category, but it's adequate. And the gearbox, you just need to put your foot down, it responds quick enough so that you can pull out of junctions okay. And obviously you've got all the safety systems there. That was the collision detection warning because the car thought I was going to crash into our filming car in front. It's all fine. Apart from the brakes are just too grabby. they're so sensitive. I suppose they kind of work in conjunction with that oversensitive collision detection warning system, because it's like, oh, you want to stop? Let's just stop now. If you have one of these cars, you'll probably be on the motorway quite a bit. So I'm going to floor it. Gearbox response is okay, and so too is the engine. Decent amount of performance. The gearbox wasn't too laggy then. When you put your foot down, it responds. That's good. And I'm not getting much wind noise. I suppose it's quite a sleek, sporty looking shape, but what I am getting quite a lot of is road noise. It's not quite as relaxing a cruiser as I was hoping it would be. As for the economy, well, this car's supposed to do around 31 to 32 miles to the gallon, which is all right. You'll get more out of the diesel, over 40. So if you're doing lots of long distance miles, that would be the one to go for. This particular version of the Genesis has adaptive dampers. So when I put it into sports mode, which I've just done, as well as like adding weight to the steering, it also stiffens up the suspension. The only problem with that is that it does feel a little bit too bouncy. And if I go all the way into Sport Plus mode, I'm thinking, wait a minute, now we've got a proper performance saloon that's also a little bit worried about me crashing into the car in front, even though it was quite far away. So when I looked at the car from the outside, and from what I've seen from the interior, I'm thinking, oh yeah, it's going to be quite the thing on a twisty road, this. So is it? Well, here's some corners, let's find out. Ooh, blimey heck, the suspension's bouncy. I'm going to have to come out of that mode. That's no good, it's rubbish. Right, sport. Oh. Still too bouncy. Gonna have to go back into comfort. The suspension's just not up to the task of going quick down a B road in sports mode, so you have to have it in comfort. And regardless of which mode you're in, there's just something about the chassis and the steering as well. Let's say this, the sporty looks are false promises. It's not a fun car to drive, it's just meh. I'm a little bit disappointed, to tell you the truth. It looks like it's going to be more fun than it actually is. It's very average. Considering this car's rear-wheel drive, you think you're going to get that nice sporty driving experience, the sensation of being pushed out of a corner, but you don't really feel it. You can't really feel that the chassis is particularly exciting. It seems like a wasted opportunity. Okay, now for the DS9, and this car is all about the comfort, and this one has the upgraded suspension which can read the road ahead and slacken off the suspension if it sees a bump, and I must say it feels very, very comfortable. What's also nice, the light steering, very easy to make manoeuvres. Gearbox is pretty good, but sometimes when you're braking it can clunk a little bit as you change down. Now this car has regen on the braking, but in some ways it feels better than the braking on the Genesis, and you've got the added benefit with this car being able to put it into electric mode and just cruise about silently while you're driving it in town. In fact, you can do over 30 miles on electric power alone and up to speeds of 80 miles an hour. And it does have enough oomph in electric mode to nip out of junctions and stuff like that, which is what you want. The only area where I don't think this is quite as good as the Genesis for in town is the visibility. The dash is slightly higher and the view out the back window isn't quite so good. Other than that, this is a better town car. What's the DS9 like at higher speeds though? I'm going to floor it. Okay, the pickup isn't quite as good as in the Genesis. I thought being a hybrid, it would have that thing where the electric motor really just provides that little bit of initial punch before the engine comes on song, but I didn't really notice it. It was a bit laboured. Also, the noise the car makes, like, as you accelerate, it's not great. Bit of a shame, because other than that, I think that when you're cruising, this is a more relaxing experience than the Genesis. So I'd rather do long distances in this. In terms of the economy, well, unfortunately doing long distances in this will affect it. Now DS claim that this car will be able to do between 200 and 300 miles per gallon, but that's only if you're using the hybrid system properly, you know, plugging it in regularly, mainly using electric power. The reality is you're going to get way lower. So this car's mainly been driven on a long distance and it's averaging just under 40 miles to the gallon. So depending on how you use the car, it's just going to be like a normal petrol, maybe even slightly worse because you're carrying around the weight of the blooming batteries. It's a shame because this is a really nice cruiser, I think. All right, let's try this DS on a twisty road. I'm going to put it into sports mode. Sport, yeah, here we go. Although there's not really that much sporty about it. To be fair though, I don't think it feels any like less fun to drive than that Genesis, but it's not making any kind of claims to be sporty really, this thing. So I'm just going to back it back into comfort. Oh yeah, because that's what this car is about, and it's honest in that respect. It'll hold onto the road as well as you need it to. It'll go around corners okay. I don't really feel any connection with the road or the front wheels. You know, the steering's a bit like loose and vague, but it does all it needs to with a bit of lean in the bends, but you forgive it because it's not supposed to be sport. It's not trying to be. And the suspension is doing a nice job of ironing out the bumps, so I'm fine with it. I'm fine with how it's driving on a twisty road. Yeah, the Genesis may be sharper, but it's not as sharp as you want it to be, whereas this is just adequate for what you expect of it. It's all about the comfort, and I'll take that. Right in, Mercedes C-Class. And this feels a grade above the other two cars, just a little bit more, Being the plug-in hybrid, I'm going to do what I did with the DS and put it into electric only mode. And the good thing about this one is the range, you know, over 60 miles on electric power alone. So you get this plug-in hybrid, you can pretty much do most of your local driving and short commutes on electric only mode. And that's what I do. I just drive it like an electric C-Class. It's got enough punch, the electric motor, to get past traffic, to overtake, pull out of junctions. It's pretty good. It's more powerful feeling than the DS. Also, while the DS has that clever suspension, I actually think this is even more comfortable, even though it's just got a standard setup. Really is nice. Steering's light, visibility pretty good. Bit better than the DS. Not quite as good as the Genesis, but that's not going to sway your decision. This just feels like a nicer car to drive than both of them already in town. The only thing I'm not so keen on though are the brakes. I mean the brakes on this plug-in hybrid version, because you've got regen braking and it just feels a little bit inconsistent. There's not much braking at first, but then it suddenly just comes on. That's the only fly in the ointment. Other than that, I'm really liking it. And that was the petrol engine kicking in there. I mean, in some ways you can see this car as being an electric C-Class with a range extender. Now for the overtake test on the C-Class. So 40 miles an hour, 3, 2, 1, flooring it. The hybrid system seems smoother, a bit more connected between the engine, the gearbox and the electric motor. Also, this is really nice. A bit quieter, I think. It's the quietest car to travel in so far. You know, C-Class designed for going up and down the motorway, or should that be the Autobahn? Germans don't talk like that at all. I don't know what I'm going on about. Really, really nice though. Less nice is the real world economy. Mercedes says this car will do over 500 miles to the gallon. This is getting just over 40. Yeah, it's been driven mainly on petrol power, hasn't it? And that's the reality of these hybrids. If you take them on the motorway, you're going to get the diesel if you're doing long distance journeys, and in that respect, brilliant. Normal petrol's pretty blooming good as well. Finally then, twisty road in the Mercedes. I'm not going to bother putting it into sport because unlike in the other two cars, it doesn't affect the suspension settings. Being the plug-in hybrid version, it is carrying more weight than the standard normal internal combustion engine versions of the C-Class, but it's still handling better than the Genesis plus the DS9. It's actually pretty good, this thing. You know, the suspension's comfy, yeah, it manages to keep the car fairly level in the bends, and the steering's accurate, plus being rear-wheel drive, you get that sensation of being pushed out of the bends, and this car definitely just feels a lot more polished to drive than the other two. Yeah, Mercedes know what they're doing when it comes to building posh-feeling cars.
How can I help?
Cancel. Shame about that though. I suppose normal people aren't saying the M word when they're just driving on their own. It's just a weird thing that happens to motoring journalists who have to say that word. All right, let's see what this BMW 3 Series is like to drive. Apparently they haven't really done anything to the chassis because it was so well sorted, or so they thought. They were right. So this car has the M Sport suspension, was a little bit stiff in the standard setup, and you do notice it over bumps, so you just feel them a bit more. Though it doesn't feel uncomfortable, and the way it controls itself after experiencing a bump is quite impressive. It just feels like unflustered. A very sure-footed car, this. One thing I should point out is that if you have the plug-in hybrid version of this car, then the suspension seems stiffer still, because obviously it needs to be to cope with the added weight of all the electrical equipment. And I think if I was going for a plug-in hybrid specifically, I would go for the Mercedes over the BMW, because the electric only range on the BMW is about half that of the C-Class. Driving around town, easy. Steering is precise. It's not heavy. Yeah, it's not too light either. And the gearbox, oh, it's so smooth and relaxing when you want it to be, and it'll find the right gear if you give it a prod and go, hey, come on, let's get moving. As for the visibility, I think it's good. Decent sized back window, good view forward, about as good as it gets really in a saloon car. It's nice. Right, let's test out the overtaking ability from 40 miles an hour. I'm going to floor it. Took a moment for the gearbox to kick down, but now the engine's off. Considering there's no hybrid fill-in, no electric motors to assist in that light pause, pickup was very good. And when you're cruising along, noise levels are on a par with the Mercedes, just as comfy. Didn't used to be the case, but BMW have got it sorted now. And then there's the economy, which is the funniest bit of all. 43 miles to the gallon. Getting better economy from this than the Mercedes, and that's the point, you see. Because the Mercedes was running in petrol only mode and it was having to carry around those batteries, it was less efficient. So unless you're really going to use the hybrid system, go with the normal petrol or diesel. Now we come to a twisty road, and I have a feeling this is where the BMW is really going to shine. So the benefit of that firmer suspension setup is that it just stays flatter through the bends. Oh my gosh, it's like a different world really, the way it goes around corners. The steering is more responsive, more precise, feel more what's going on. The body itself just turns in quicker, it just feels more agile, more playful, and actually genuinely good fun. This being the rear drive version has that sportier feeling than the four-wheel drive, but if you get the four-wheel drive version, you've got the benefit of the extra grip, and in fact there's not much in it in terms of how sporty they feel. Such a good car on a twisty road. Always has been, and so far no reason to think it's going to change. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Finally we come to the Audi A4, and I'm going to try and just talk about the range as a whole. Yes, I know I'm driving the sporty S4, but I've obviously driven the standard car as well, and that's what we're really comparing. This is a very easy car to drive around town. I think overall it has the best visibility, nice low dash, decent view at the back window, good side mirrors, the steering's well judged, it's accurate and light, really nice. Gearbox, this is an 8-speed auto, but if you have the 7-speed auto on the rest of the models, it's a little bit jerkier at lower speeds than this 8-speed, but generally it's good and it's responsive when you put your foot down. In terms of the suspension, this being the S model, it does have firmer, stiffened suspension, but it's actually, once again, really well judged. That while firm, it's fair, in the same way that the BMWs is. It used to be the case that if you had the sporty suspension in Audis, it was just rock solid and horrible. This, no, it's good. It just rounds off the edges of the bumps. And if you have the more comfort orientated suspension, which you can get on other models, it's really quite comfy. Not quite as comfy as the Mercedes, but not far off. You can see that Audi has gone, right, this car needs to be in between the Mercedes and the BMW. That's where we exist, and they fit that niche really, really well. There is one problem though. Unlike the BMW and the Mercedes, you cannot get a plug-in hybrid, and if that's your thing, if you want one of those because they've got lower company car tax, or you want that ability to drive on electric power alone, you can't get the Audi, forget it. Now to do the acceleration test from 40 miles an hour. I think it's going to be quick. Here we go. Hell, blimey. This engine, yeah, you might think an S car, an Audi S car shouldn't have a diesel, but wow, this has got some punch. The performance is quite incredible really. It just surges on a wave of torque. To be fair, you don't really need all this performance. The normal 2-litre diesel has enough punch, and that will be the one I'd go for, partly because the economy is so good. So that car in the real world, you'll get over 40 miles to the gallon. This one is actually averaging 31. Regardless of which version of the A4 you go for, they're all very, very quiet. It's actually so hard to choose between this, the Mercedes and the BMW for quietness. They are all above both the Genesis and that DS. It's a toughie to call it, you know. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to experience the performance again. It's nuts to think that a car with this much power can actually return over 30 miles to the gallon. Here's the country road. So obviously being the S version, it's sharper than the standard A4, plus it benefits from quattro all-wheel drive, which is handy in these conditions. So when we get into a corner, come out the other side, you can pin it and it puts its power down brilliantly. There's just so much traction, and even though the suspension is firm, it's dealing with the bumps quite well. It's not like skitting about all over the place. Now, most A4s are front wheel drive, and if you accelerate hard out of a corner like I did out of that corner, they'll start to spin their wheels, and then the stability control will kick in, it'll slow things off. But generally, they all go round corners very, very well. In fact, you can think of these cars as being a halfway house between the more salubrious Mercedes and the sharper, bit more sporty biased BMW. It's clear that the Germans are operating in this one sphere, then the competitors are sort of in this slightly lower second division tier. So then, what's my final verdict? Well, at the beginning of this video, I said, should you ignore the Germans and get something left field? And the answer to that is, no, you should not. So I'm just going to reject these cars right now, and then we've got a much harder decision to make between those three over there. Now this is the tough question. Which of these three very, very good German cars should you go for? Well, it's been around for a while now, but the Audi A4 really does stack up very well compared to these newer cars from both Mercedes and BMW. Though I do think the Mercedes C-Class is slightly better overall than the Audi, and if you want a plug-in hybrid, it is the one to have. However, if you don't want the plug-in hybrid, I'd say go with the BMW 3 Series. It really is the best all-round posh family saloon car, and that's why it wins this test. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a like. Let me know if you agree with my verdict in the comments below. Click on those windows for some more videos, and on that box there to go to Carwow to compare offers across a wide range of cars. Thanks for watching.